Before freeways carved the basin into concrete rivers, before palm trees became branding, before Hollywood sold dreams by the reel, there was a sprawling, sun-bleached city learning how to be modern. In 1930, Los Angeles was not yet myth, not yet machine, but something stranger. A place where oil derricks stood beside orange groves, silent film stars walked streets still half rural. And the future arrived unevenly, like weather. In 1930, Los Angeles was a city mid-transformation, stretching outward rather than upward, inhaling land with a confidence that bordered on disbelief. The skyline barely existed by later standards. Height had not yet become identity. Space was the true currency. Streets wandered long and wide, often ending not in dense blocks but in dust, fields, or sudden quiet neighborhoods where the city seemed to forget itself. The Great Depression had just begun its slow tightening, though its full weight had not yet settled into every corner. The optimism of the 1920s still lingered like heat stored in pavement. Developers continued to advertise sunshine as destiny. Land remained an article of faith. Real estate brochures promised health, prosperity, reinvention. The language was evangelical. California was not sold as geography, but as salvation. Downtown functioned as the city's gravitational center, though even then the pull felt fragile. The financial district, civic buildings, theaters, and department stores gathered there, forming something that resembled an urban core. Streetcars rattled through the grid, their electric hum carrying clerks, shoppers, stenographers, and dreamers. The Pacific Electric Railway, the famous red cars, stitched together a region that already behaved like a constellation rather than a single star. Hollywood, meanwhile, was both workplace and spectacle. The film industry had matured into an economic engine, but it still possessed an improvisational energy. Sound films were replacing silent pictures, and the shift was not merely technical but existential. Careers faltered, voices betrayed faces, studios rebuilt workflows overnight. Entire production systems reorganized themselves around microphones, soundproof stages, and the strange tyranny of recorded dialogue. Actors accustomed to communicating through gesture now confronted the unforgiving intimacy of speech. Accents became liabilities. Vocal timbre acquired market value. The illusion of glamour remained intact for audiences, but behind studio gates anxiety moved like an invisible current. The industry's transformation mirrored the city's own, rapid, opportunistic, slightly chaotic. Los Angeles was already deeply tied to the automobile, though not yet dominated by it. Cars multiplied quickly, symbols of freedom and necessity at once. The city's geography practically demanded them. Distances were long, destinations scattered, public transit extensive but imperfect. The automobile did not merely supplement movement, it redefined spatial logic. Neighborhoods expanded along roadways. Commerce followed traffic. The seeds of the freeway age were quietly germinating. Yet remnants of an earlier landscape persisted. Orange groves still dotted the basin. Oil fields punctuated neighborhoods with forests of wooden derricks, mechanical insects nodding endlessly against the sky. The juxtaposition felt improbable but ordinary. Industry and agriculture coexisted without ceremony. The city had not yet decided what it wanted to erase. Climate exerted its subtle authority. Sunshine shaped psychology as much as economy. The light was not incidental but structural, influencing architecture, lifestyle, and migration patterns. Buildings leaned toward openness. Indoor and outdoor boundaries blurred. Health seekers arrived chasing dry air and promises of recovery. Tuberculosis patients, retirees, Midwestern families, all carried narratives of escape. Water, invisible but decisive, underwrote everything. The Los Angeles aqueduct, completed years earlier, had already rewritten the city's limits. Growth became hydraulically possible. Expansion acquired engineering legitimacy. Few residents saw the distant sources sustaining their daily lives. Yet every lawn, every subdivision, every new neighborhood rested on that monumental act of redirection. Socially, Los Angeles in 1930 was a mosaic of arrivals. Migration defined its character. The city felt less like inheritance and more like experiment. People came not because their ancestors had, but because advertisements, stories, and economic currents drew them westward. Reinvention functioned as civic mythology. Inequality, however, threaded through the optimism. Economic hardship intensified as the depression deepened. Unemployment lines lengthened. Municipal budgets strained. The film industry provided jobs, but also volatility. Construction slowed. Behind the city's marketed brightness, uncertainty accumulated. Residential life unfolded across newly formed suburbs. Bungalows dominated modest structures expressing a democratic architectural vocabulary. Homes spread horizontally, each claiming a fragment of land. Density remained negotiable. Privacy felt achievable. The suburban imagination, lawns, porches, detached houses, found fertile ground. Culturally, Los Angeles existed in a peculiar tension between provincialism and innovation. Eastern observers often dismissed it as immature, a city without deep historical roots. Yet its lack of entrenched tradition also enabled flexibility. New industries, new social forms, new identities emerged with fewer constraints. The city operated like a laboratory for modern living. Nightlife carried its own energy. Theaters glowed. Jazz drifted from clubs. Prohibition lingered, but enforcement fluctuated, producing a landscape of speakeasies, coded entrances, negotiated legality. Entertainment functioned as both escape and economy. Even in hardship, spectacle persisted. Los Angeles was not yet the polished icon later decades would construct. It was rawer, more transitional, defined by movement rather than completion. The city felt like something happening rather than something established. By 1930, the illusion of boundless growth began encountering the friction of reality. The depression tightened gradually, its effects uneven but unmistakable. Optimism did not vanish overnight. It thinned, hesitated, recalibrated. The city's expansion slowed but did not entirely stall. Momentum possessed inertia. Daily life adapted with quiet resilience. Families economized. Businesses contracted. Informal economies surfaced. The city's spatial looseness softened certain shocks. Gardens supplemented food. Extended networks of neighbors and relatives redistributed strain. Hardship spread, yet survival strategies diversified. The entertainment industry continued functioning, paradoxically thriving in the demand for distraction. Audiences sought temporary suspension from economic anxiety. Movie palaces filled with viewers willing to exchange coins for narrative relief. Cinema became both commodity and psychological refuge. Urban geography continued its outward drift. Los Angeles resisted vertical consolidation. Instead, it multiplied neighborhoods. Each district cultivated micro-identities, architectural styles, commercial strips, social textures. The city behaved less like a single organism and more like a federation of loosely connected environments. The automobile's influence intensified. Streets increasingly organized around vehicular flow. Parking lots replaced older structures. Gas stations proliferated. Commercial corridors stretched along boulevards. Movement patterns reshaped economic landscapes. Distance became normalized rather than resisted. Yet the city still retained an almost uncanny sense of openness. Empty lots, undeveloped parcels, and semi-rural edges punctuated the urban fabric. Silence was never far away. One could drive minutes from bustling intersections into spaces that felt startlingly incomplete. Architecture mirrored aspiration and pragmatism. Art Deco facades appeared downtown, projecting modernity through geometry and ornament. Civic buildings adopted monumental styles, broadcasting institutional confidence. Residential construction leaned toward modest comfort. Style functioned as psychological statement. Environmental awareness, though not yet framed in contemporary language, lurked beneath development. Smog had not yet defined the skyline, but industrial activity and automobile growth foreshadowed atmospheric consequences. The basin's geography, ringed by mountains, quietly prepared the stage for future visibility crises. Los Angeles' relationship with nature remained curiously ambiguous. The landscape was both resource and backdrop. Beaches, mountains, deserts, proximity to varied environments shaped leisure and imagination. The city marketed climate and scenery as lifestyle assets. Recreation intertwined with identity. Demographically, diversity continued expanding. Mexican, Asian, Black, and European communities contributed labor, culture, and social complexity. Segregation and discrimination structured many interactions, embedding inequality into spatial arrangements. Opportunity coexisted with exclusion. Labor tensions simmered beneath the surface. Economic contraction sharpened conflicts over wages, employment, and unionization. The city's industries, film, oil, agriculture, manufacturing, generated distinct labor dynamics. Stability was uneven. Power asymmetries persisted. Despite hardship, Los Angeles retained a peculiar forward orientation. The city's narrative leaned toward becoming rather than reflecting. Even setbacks appeared temporary within its civic imagination. Reinvention remained plausible. The future functioned as psychological buffer. Technological modernity seeped into everyday experience. Radios carried voices across distance. Electric infrastructure expanded. Consumer goods promised efficiency and novelty. The rhythms of modern life accelerated, though not uniformly distributed across class or neighborhood. Public spaces carried layered meanings. Parks offered relief and visibility. Streets served as commercial arteries and social theaters. Beaches operated as democratic landscapes where status blurred temporarily under sunlight. Urban experience unfolded through mobility. Los Angeles in 1930 was neither utopia nor cautionary tale. It was a city negotiating contradictions. Expansion amid contraction, glamour amid precarity, openness amid inequality. Its identity remained fluid, unsettled, experimental. Memory often simplifies such periods, flattening complexity into nostalgia or tragedy. The lived reality was more textured. People worked, worried, adapted, entertained, persisted. The city continued assembling itself through millions of small decisions, improvisations, and accommodations. What emerges when observing Los Angeles at that moment is not a single defining image, but a pattern of transitions. A city learning scale. A society adjusting to technological acceleration. An economy confronting systemic shock. A culture manufacturing dreams while grappling with uncertainty. Los Angeles was already becoming the symbol it would later embody, though in 1930 the symbolism had not yet hardened. The myth was still under construction, scaffolding visible, foundations unsettled, outcomes unresolved. History rarely offers clean beginnings. Cities do not wake up transformed. They drift, layer, accumulate. In 1930, Los Angeles stood not at an origin or climax, but within a continuum of becoming. A sprawling, sunlit experiment whose consequences were still quietly unfolding.